Hello everybody, welcome back to Magic Spanish. Today I'm going to talk about some of the most common ways to say of course in Spanish. To be honest, I think there's probably a ton of ways to say of course in Spanish. From some of the research I have done, there are so many different options that different natives are giving, and I think the best you can do as somebody learning Spanish is to pick a few options, know them well, and use them most of the time because I think trying to track down all the different ways and why and when they are used is too complicated. Maybe you can adjust to what the natives use in the area you are in, but otherwise I would go with just a few core options. First up is por supuesto. This one is extremely popular and I think it is the most common for people who are learning Spanish. This is the only way to say of course that I learned from Duolingo, and I spent a long time thinking that was the main way to say it. Por supuesto is a little bit more formal. For example, ¿le gustaría algo más? Por supuesto. Another example, ¿puedo hacerte una pregunta? Por supuesto que sí. From what I understand, por supuesto is good for polite situations, customer service, or when you want to be respectful. However, although I said por supuesto is extremely common and it is the first one that I learned, the next one is, I think, the most common and natural way to say of course in Spanish, and that is claro, or claro que sí. This is the one that I've heard the most when I watch Spanish TV shows or movies and in real life. I think if you want to know only one way to say of course and you want to sound the most natural, I think this is the best one. Really easy to say, it rolls right off the tongue, and it just sounds natural. Claro. Some examples, ¿me ayudas con esto? Claro. Another example, ¿vienes mañana? Claro que sí. I tried to find out what the difference is between claro and claro que sí. I didn't find a definitive answer. Google says that claro que sí is a little bit more affirmative. I don't know if that's how natives see it. That's something I'd be curious to hear from native Spanish speakers. Do you have a difference, or is it just interchangeable depending on what you feel like saying? But either way, I think claro and claro que sí are extremely good, natural ways to say of course in Spanish, and it is probably your best go-to, and it is my favorite as well. The last one that I want to cover is como no. This one is very interesting and definitely very native sounding. It is something that is very common in Spanish where they'll say something that sounds backwards or opposite to what you would think it would mean, but it's what they use. It's something that's very natural for natives, but is probably less common and normal feeling for people who are learning Spanish as a second language. Because como no literally means how not. So you could translate how not to be of course. It's kind of a double negative almost. But I kind of like it. It sounds natural and it definitely just sounds and feels like something you would do in Spanish. One example is ¿me pasas la sal? Como no? Of course. Another example, ¿puedes venir más temprano? Como no, sin problema. I think if you say como no, it sounds extremely natural and definitely adds a little bit of personality. And if you were speaking to somebody who is a Spanish-speaking native, I bet that you would surprise them by using a phrase like como no. I would think that they probably don't hear that way of saying of course from a lot of non-native speakers. Those are the three that I wanted to cover in this video. Like I said, I think there's probably so many out there, like a lot of terms and phrases in Spanish. You could go crazy trying to learn them all. Just pick a few that work for you. Like I said, I think my favorite is claro and claro que sí. I like como no. That one would be a little bit more fun to try, but I think claro is such a good go-to. And as long as you have one that you like, you can use that in most situations. See you next time.